Good evening. The news gang is here. The stakes are getting higher. 1 death, 31 cases, and a recovery. The little virus that has stopped the whole wide world. Also on the show tonight, hand washing has never been this difficult. Who will give us a hand? And by the way, where did Parliament go? We'll also take a look at the tax cuts, the pay cuts, and the fat cuts. Not forgetting the take, the memo, the punchline, the kicker, and of course, the angle. Welcome to the show, social distancing check. Yes, and we have washed our hands, right? We have. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Yvonne actually was giving an update of a story. British Airways flight landing at JKIA.
Yes.
And now there's confirmation coming from KCA that in fact that plane was coming to evacuate the nationals who are in this country, Yvonne.
Yes, that's right. So we did report about the British Airways flight BA65 from London Heathrow. It arrived about 20 minutes ago. And the US Embassy also made reference to it in their verified page, where they talked and advised American citizens to take advantage of these flights to evacuate their citizens. Remember, they were allowed to evacuate their citizens. So that'll be happening Saturday and Sunday. And here's a further update to that flight. Gilbert Kibe from the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority confirms the landing of that British aircraft this evening, and he says it is to pick passengers who are being evacuated. It's leaving tonight, I think at about midnight, and he says the aircraft came empty. And then there's, do we have another update? Yes, the US Embassy also advising its citizens who want to leave to book BA, as it has flights running up to Sunday. So
yeah,
that's
actually interesting.
Yes.
I mean, because on Monday when the health CS was giving a raft of measures that were issued that included the ban on international flights that took effect yesterday, he actually said that countries that wished to evacuate their nationals could do that as long as the plane came empty and then just carried them out.
Right.
So that's what Gilbert Kibe, the Director General of Kenya's Civil Aviation Authority, saying there. An update that we got. And very dramatic times, Linus. International flights, all of them banned, unprecedented.
Totally unprecedented, Joe. And this is really the first time in the history of aviation that there has been a paralysis of this kind. International travel has never been brought down the way it has been this time by the coronavirus spread. And it's going to also bring out a number of other problems. Key of all is the interconnectivity of the global economy. If Britain or Italy is affected, then Kenya will be in a way because of international travel and because of the import and export market. These are tough times for the globe. It's very, very difficult time to be a government, very difficult time to be a leader, because people expect answers from problems you have not had the opportunity
and clearly from what's going around the world, no one really seems to have figured this thing out.
Nobody has.
People are groping in the dark almost all at the same time, Yvonne.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, interesting times. Like you say, we have no reference. We have no template for this. I think the one we had that compares to this is the Spanish flu of 1918. How many were alive at that time? I mean, of course, there's documented evidence as to how to deal with
was
it.
Happening anyways.
There were, the train and all of that that's happening in the world. And I think if you take a look at what's happening in US media, I was watching CNN yesterday, and doctors were describing what is happening in their hospitals as akin to what they see in the third world. In fact, there was a doctor who said, if there is a fourth world, then we are it. So they're struggling just as much as others in the developing world, in the global south, with numbers of doctors, with equipment, with a healthcare system that is struggling, with an economy. I mean, the US just passed its biggest stimulus to date of, is it 2 or 3? $2 trillion US dollars. So unprecedented times. And another thing I need to add that, sorry, we mentioned at the start of the bulletin, I found this mind-boggling. 1/3 of the world's humanity is under lockdown
yes,
at
yes,
this moment.
1.7
Never
billion.
before. 2.6 billion people around the world are under lockdown in their respective countries. That's huge.
One third, but one country.
Yep.
Interesting, but you know what I've also noticed people talking about, which I found startling, the fact that a lot of these countries did not have experience with infectious diseases because they're not used to. I mean, they don't have that kind of thing. I mean, it's the sort of thing that perhaps some people are saying now might give us a little bit of an advantage because everything is infectious around here. So we've been dealing with a lot of these things. We have doctors, for instance, who are in the Ebola crisis in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and in Africa, infectious diseases has been something that keeps coming almost every.
We've had a cholera outbreak in the country for 3 years.
Exactly.
Just to
exactly, and it keeps going and coming and popping up in different places. So there's a sense in which all of this is not totally strange, and that I think is something that is going to redraw a lot of things about how countries look at themselves, because some of them think, well, you know, we got rid of all of these things, then suddenly the novel coronavirus shows up, and they have to dig up whatever they had left maybe several years ago. Francis.
Oh yeah, but even worse for us is what we have been doing with our health system for many years. Look, the amount of investment that we've made as a country over the past regimes, specifically on the health sector or in the health sector. And if very strong economies are struggling with the situation that we are in globally, then God forbid if it was to get into the kind of a scenario that you see in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal, we would basically be on our knees. I mean, go to our local health centers. They are struggling with medical personnel, with its basic essentials. I mean, it is in this country that we've talked about patients sharing a bed. You remember that incident in Kiambu where 3-4 patients were sharing a bed? Imagine if we were to get into that situation. And we are still struggling with basic essentials. So I'm really hoping that it does not get to the scenario that we have seen in other stronger economies that have, over a period of years, invested heavily in their health sector. This is a country where if nurses go on strike, if doctors go on strike, people really suffer. And couple that with, we've still been struggling with cancer, with diabetes, with hypertension. And these are the diseases that we are being told if
those are pre-existing conditions.
Pre-existing conditions. Yes. So if we are hit a good one, things will be very bad.
But we get to all of that in a minute. But yesterday the president made some very dramatic pronouncements, far-reaching consequences or implications, Jamila.
Yes.
We have, since the 1982 attempted coup, we have not seen massive curfews in this country. Of course, there have been some in Lamu. Even 1982, it was really just in Nairobi and perhaps I think Nanyuki it was. This is a countrywide curfew starting tomorrow, and no one actually knows when it is going to end. So we can listen to the president, and then we'll start with Jamila. Today it doesn't seem you are calling the shots.
No.
But let's start with the president.
The National Security Council of the Republic of Kenya
was enough.
has today sanctioned and caused the issuance of Public Order Number 1 on the coronavirus pandemic with the following key aspects. That effective Friday, 27th March 2020, there will be a daily curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. And this shall be in effect in the territory of the Republic of Kenya, with all movement by persons not authorized to do so, or not being medical professionals, health workers, critical and essential service providers, being prohibited between these hours.
Just to say that we will be here, we are part of essential services, but Jamila, a very interesting turn of events, and it had been preceded by that complaint from the CS that we were basically indisciplined, that we were not doing some of the things that appeared very basic.
And this is true, Joe, because it is important that we do these basic things, considering how this virus is spreading. Your word, social distancing, as we said again and again. I think this is why the government is putting this directive that watu wakae nyumbani between 7 p.m. and 5 a.m. Some people would ask you, but why at night? Why not during the day? Why put a curfew at night? And I think the reasoning could be, and that's just what I think, to let at least people be able to earn a living, those who can during the day. Because ukisema ume shut down completely, what happens to people who actually survive on that daily wage? We were talking about this last week. So the order is on, starts tomorrow night, and I want to see how it will be enforced and whether people will actually listen and stay at home when they're supposed to. Because we've been told, wacheni kukangamana, stop congregating in places, but people are still doing it. I think we did a story today and even yesterday, and I think people are going about their businesses as usual. And Mutahi Kagwe, the minister, said, these are extraordinary times. This is not a joke. In fact, if you're going about your life as usual, then there's something wrong. You need to be careful. We don't want to go the way of Italy or the US. And remember, I was looking at a list of the top 10 countries, Joe, that have the highest number of coronavirus cases in terms of infections and deaths. Out of the 10, 5 are actually members of the G7 countries, the countries with the highest economies in the world, from the US to Italy to Germany to France, and they're suffering. And I really worry, as Gashuri was talking about, what would happen to us if this ended up being worse than it already is, because we had 31 confirmed cases, and then we got the sad news of one person passing away from the virus. 30 is the number that we still have. Some are doing very well. In fact, one of the patients was actually discharged. So it seems like we are doing the right things as far as what we're calling the pre-pandemic steps that are being taken. But my worry is, Joe, and Dr. Oluga alluded to it when you were speaking to Yvonne earlier, is that what are we doing now for after that now? We are doing a lot of things in terms of trying to control the spread. But what about now after? Let's say we do have a number of people who need ICU services, or who need ventilators, or who need that special medical care. Do we have that? Do we have the machines? Do we have the personnel? So my worry is that what happens after? We're doing very well now with washing mkono, all the directives are being given. We have sanitizers all over the place. There are people washing their hands at bus stages and before entering a matatu. But what happens afterwards?
Yeah, and Linus, one of the things that people have been discussing is the case of Italy, because Italy is, I think, a very sad portrait, really, of what it means to not follow some of those things. Because one of the things that I have read about, that when they shut down the schools, these people thought this was a time to go for holidays, and Italy is a very social society. I mean, people love partying and clubbing and all those things, and by the time the lockdowns and all of these things were coming in force, where the military now is coming out, it appeared that it was really too late, because this pandemic had completely taken over that society. They had what they are calling now community transmission, where entire neighborhoods, like for instance now in Bergamo, where this thing is really like the epicenter right now, where a lot of people, almost every family has someone somewhere who has been affected in this manner. What comes to your mind when you think about the Italy experience, and considering the stage at which we are right now?
What comes to mind, Joe, is fear about the next 2 weeks. And the next 2 weeks, meaning 14 days after every last confirmation of a case. Mm-hmm. Because I know Cabinet Secretary Kagwe did say that this coming week is crucial for Kenya, because we then get to know the extent of the spread of this virus through the community route. But by community, it means, it has already landed here. Now it's from one Kenyan to another, and a Kenyan who has been here, as opposed to one that has traveled. So next week will be very, very crucial to Kenya. And the sad thing and worrying thing, and you've pointed out correctly there, Joe, is Italy has done exactly the same mistakes that Kenyans are committing, which is basically don't take it seriously. Mm-hmm. It's not in your neighborhood, it could be elsewhere, it's not about you. And when they closed school, yes, that's what they did. They took their kids to holidays. We also do know, and you just need to be in any of these big malls in Nairobi, that immediately schools were closed, by the president on Monday, Tuesday. There were parents with children in malls around Nairobi, children playing and all that. What this disease thrives on, as per what we are seeing, is casualness. If you are casual with the basics, whether it's about washing hands, whether it's about staying in one place as required by the health authorities, then you're going to pay the price. But I just want to briefly talk on about the curfew that Jamila was talking about, and the president did announce yesterday that we'll have a curfew between 7 p.m.
and 5 a.m.
and 5 a.m. in the morning. I know the president has been under a lot of pressure. You've seen calls for a lockdown, and no less the media itself has been talking about lockdowns. But the question would be, can Kenya really afford a lockdown?
That's right. Because
lockdown is a very, very serious step. Lockdown actually means exactly that. There'll be no movement of people from one place to another. You can't move to the market because you are required to be home. There are a number of practical questions that Kenya must navigate before actually going the route of a lockdown. Mm-hmm. First, we're not a welfare state. We're not very good with social welfare state. So if people in Kibera want food and you've asked them not to leave, how will you feed them?
Yeah.
That is the nightmare.
They'll just leave and go look for it.
Yeah.
They'll go look for it. And anywhere, including State House, and they can get it. So the thing is, you don't rush into such things unless you have practical measures on the ground that can allow that. Now, we saw what India is doing. I hope some of those images are fake, where we've seen policemen beating people. Police beatings there are quite, we've seen a lot of videos even in the past. So you can't tell whether they're coming from the current situation or not. Which takes me to my last point about the curfew. What we hope not to see, and I hope the Police Inspector General, who I believe will be the one in charge of enforcing, we've not been told who will actually do the physical job of enforcing the curfew. I hope they will avoid bad manners, because curfew is an opportunity for badly behaved soldiers, badly behaved policemen to do the wrong things, just harass people, make them swim in pools of water. Where have you been? Rudi Mali ulitoka. You know, those sit down and stuff like that. We do not want to see, it will be very sad to see that happening in the country, especially considering what the strain this disease has meant to everybody, including people who are living in the slums. We need to see enforcement that is firm, but one that is also civil.
Which I thought was something that probably the president should have addressed. I think that there was a question left lingering that, okay, so what happens if you are found out there at 8 p.m., someone meets you out there walking about, driving on the road, and you don't happen to fall in the category of people who are exempted from it. I mean, that ought to have been spelled out clearly so that people actually know. Because it does appear to me that now it is left to, as you were pointing out, to police officers and whoever else will be out there enforcing it, to, quite frankly, just do whatever they want with you. And that's actually quite dangerous, knowing that what has happened here before.
I'm looking at the Gazette notice that was published by that was issued by Dr. Matiang'i, the CS in charge of Interior Affairs and Coordination of National Government. Number 4, it says, under this order, there shall be no public gatherings, processions or movement, either alone or as a group, during the period of the curfew. So essentially, whatever you're doing, just make sure that you're at home by 7 p.m. And also take note that public service vehicles are not part of the essential services in that list of.
So they must be off the road by 7 p.m.
They must be off the road by 7 p.m. So actually, when you talk about a lockdown, I think we are, from tomorrow we'll be on partial lockdown or 50% lockdown. Why? Because let's say for people who would have wanted to travel up country, how long does a journey from, let's say, Nairobi to Moyale take? Nairobi to Mandera take? Nairobi to, let's say, Busia take by public transport? It means if you don't leave very early in the morning, you will not be able to get to your destination.
You stop and wait for...
You stop and
So
wait
it just
for
means there's no
following day.
night travel, basically.
And what happens if, for whatever reason, let's say you boarded a vehicle early in the morning, it developed a mechanical problem along the way, and by 7 o'clock or thereabout, you were still on the road, probably not very far off from home. Do you move to the next police station and stay there, or report yourself that, hey, I'm unable to get home by 7 p.m.? So essentially, we are on a 50% lockdown. And how the security officers will deal with people who will be in breach of this curfew will be very interesting to watch. But now the problem is, who will document that violation if it happens? Because even for us, we will be probably in a certain measure be unable to go into some places, so to say. So as Lina says, this unfortunately offers a very good opportunity for bad reasons for some things to happen away from the glare of the public.
But it also says, Yvonne, that we need to try and keep to it, because that's very important.
Compliance is the only way out. But in the event that you are unable to comply for one reason or the other, circumstantially,
I guess
what happens?
Yes, it's important for that to be laid out, and maybe we will hear about that tomorrow, because it takes effect at 7 p.m. tomorrow.
But the Gazette notice
would have been a good place. But when we're talking about partial lockdowns, and there's lots of people, I think I've even seen the National Union of Teachers saying, we need to have a total lockdown. We need to be careful when we ask for a lockdown. As you said, LK, we cannot afford a lockdown in this country. And I was speaking to a senior official at State House who says this is something that they are struggling with. They do not want it to get to that. We do not have those reserves. We've talked about how badly our economy was doing before this crisis and now, and generally we're not a country that has national reserves. So let's take a look at some other countries that are on it.
Just before you go to before you go to those other countries, I just wanted to add something that, which is the mere logistics of actually implementing a lockdown. It requires boots on the ground.
Yes.
You need
resources.
Resources. Right. You have to have all those policemen, maybe the National Youth Service. Do you want to draft in the military as well to do that? And we've had failures before. Remember Matatu crackdowns?
Yes.
How long do they last?
That's right.
Yeah.
That just paints the picture of how difficult a lockdown would be. Considering
but haven't you seen when, for example, they tried to stop people from leaving, like Kibra or Madare, like, for example, during election crises and things like that? Those people will still leave if they want to leave. So if you create a situation like that, it becomes a complete nightmare. I think, Yvonne, even as you go to those countries, part of our problem in this country is we want to copy and paste what is going on in other countries.
Exactly.
Yet in actual fact, we are a very different animal altogether, so to speak, because we haven't seen any country in this part of the world that has been hit in the manner, for example, that Italy has been hit.
Right.
And we haven't seen those kinds of measures taken in the context of a developing country which has huge populations of people who are basically living on less than $1 a day. And people who depend on a daily wage. Some of it, people who go out not knowing whether they will get that job for today. Remember, even the measures the president took, the tax breaks and all of these things, they presuppose that there's a degree of work that is still going on, that if you are earning 24,000 shillings and below, you will not pay, income tax, that sort of thing. But that presupposes that you actually wake up and
have
go
a
and
job.
work. So that
and Mohammed Walia, the economist I spoke to a little earlier, also said that this doesn't, in fact, address the many people who are on daily wage. I mean, those who are on KRA are about 2 million. So this doesn't address that. But I was going to talk about whether we can afford it. I mean, if you take a look at what Canada is doing and some of the social support that they are providing. So there will be an emergency care benefit every 2 weeks for the next 14 weeks. If you have children, they have what they call a GST credit program. Every adult will get $300, every child up to $150. If you're a student, they are pausing your loan repayment for 6 months, interest-free. If you own a small business, they're giving you temporary wage subsidy for 3 months so you can keep your workers on the payroll during this time. If you're a business, there is support that is being given for you, even for farmers. So these are some of the things that they're doing. Okay, so if we take a look at ours, you know, the CBK was the one that started off by doing this, talking about, you know, going cashless. They also lowered the central bank base rate, which means there's more money that is available to them, and a number of these issues. But remember, all of these are tax breaks. Well, the president did say there would be 10 billion that would be added to the elderly orphans, the cash transfers. But that is not nearly enough. And remember, that's for the vulnerable in society who are listed as the elderly and the orphans, as opposed to...
and they must be registered in the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection.
Many of them, you know, are not, and they are quite needy.
And we saw there are people in this country, Jamila, who don't even know the Ministry of Labour exists.
They don't. Much less there is a cash subsidy program.
There's a story that was done by Mashirima Kapombe a few weeks back, actually, on this issue.
Absolutely.
And even those who are registered actually have challenges in accessing that money. And that's just... I'm sure the percentage of those who don't know is much higher than those who actually do.
The UK actually is giving, I think they are paying, they will be paying 80% of the wages.
Yes.
Because there are all these companies that now are not able to pay the wages, so they're saying, no, we'll take up 80%. You figure out how to do the 20.
And the US is about to pass the 2 trillion stimulus deal. And I was telling Yvonne that some of the measures that they're going to put in place is, other than they're giving $1,200 to millions of Americans, they'll also give about $350 billion for as loans for small businesses. They'll give $500 billion for companies that are reeling from this crisis. Other than that, because they have the money. But I was listening to Mohamed Wahilia, Yvonne, you had interviewed him, Linus, just a minute. He said for him, the measures that were announced by the president yesterday is not the way to go.
Right.
He says that we need to strengthen our health system.
Yeah.
We need to be able to take care of people.
The best stimulus is to fight COVID.
Fight COVID and go all out and fight it. And for him, he's thinking, we'll have now, of course, VAT down to 14%. We have the 24,000, those earning 24,000 and below getting 100% no tax starting. Of course, this starts from 1st of April. I think people need to understand that you start seeing this maybe at the end of April when you get your salary then. And of course, 25% for others. But as I was listening to Mohammed, like our priority right now is let's try and fight this disease. Let's invest in our healthcare.
Let me just make a quick point on these comparisons. They are unfair comparisons because we are not age mates in many ways.
That's right.
Whether we're talking about the economies and the political stages of those countries, they are far more sophisticated than we are. Which is why among the measures, curiously, the president announced yesterday were simple things that ought to be matters of course. Look at the pending bills, for example.
Yeah.
How do we include that there as an emergency measure, asking ministries and departments to cause payment of at least 13... You don't wait for an emergency.
But he did actually issue a directive on 1st of June last year. So has that not been happening? Like you say, that cannot be an emergency measure.
Don't wait for an emergency and call settling your debts part of an emergency response. It's not.
But also,
it's not. Pending bills ought not to have been in the president's statement yesterday.
Hold it right there, Linus. You see, if there was no money to pay these pending bills from June last year to now, where will that money now come from to pay those bills in 3 weeks? It means either it is one of those things, many things that are said that are unimplementable, or somebody somewhere was holding on to that money and now is being pushed to pay. Because, I mean, people have been complaining about unpaid pending bills from June last year. A presidential directive was made in the full glare of public, especially on a national holiday, and people are still complaining that they haven't been paid. Then it means if there was no money then, there has not been money for the last 8 or so months. That money, where will it come from? And secondly, our economy has not been doing very well, even before coronavirus. So where does that leave us? Where will the money come from? And thirdly, I hope Dr. Noah Wekesa, the chairman of Strategic Grain Reserves, was quoted out of context, because he said he said we don't have anything in those reserves.
Oh, wow.
So if we don't have, and then we ask for a lockdown, it means we have no food. And then also remember, not so long ago we've been dealing with the locust invasion, and actually the locusts are still with us. Yeah. Last year we talked about
kind enough to give us
failed rains. We talked about worms.
Someone suggested they are working from home, but we need to take a break. We'll be right back after a short while.